Here's what I want you to think of. Exit interviews, even if they're done well, are cold. You're cold. And what I mean by cold is saying, do you really get behind why someone's leaving? Now, it's rare that yes, you may, but for the most part, think about just, questions. You've already given your 2 weeks notice, right? So now you're called in by an HR person on staff, and they're going to ask you questions like, well, what could we have done to have made you stay? Were you managed effectively? How could we have impacted your? Okay, I think those questions are ridiculous at that point. You're gone. You are so mentally gone. It's like, why are we even spending the money and the time to have this conversation? Because usually, to your point earlier, Yahavi, they're not going to collect and do much with that data. If you were a great employee, here's the other downside to this. Great employees literally don't burn professional bridges. So they're not going to be as forthcoming as perhaps you would like in those exit interviews. They might say, well, it's been great. My boss has been under issue, but I'm good. Okay, they're going to be very accommodating. That's not good data to make changes.
You are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
What's going on, guys? It's your Javi David St. Clair Speaks, and you are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
You are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. I'm your host, Javi St. Clair, sitting down with another incredible guest. This is going to be a really, really incredible episode. I'm telling you this right now. You want to listen to this from start to finish. I feel it, and I'm telling you, it's going to be a good one. So today I'm sitting down with Merrylue Martin. She's the author of Big Quit Survival Guide. But let's dive into Merrylue's background. Okay, so Merrylue is a leadership strategist and specializing in talent retention. As a Fortune 50 senior executive and management consultant and business owner, she has extensive experience in delivering real-world process that engages and retains top performers. You know what they say, good employees are hard to find, right? But good employees are hard to retain as well. So in addition to earning her doctorates in organizational leadership, Merrylue is a graduate of the Prestige Women's Leadership Program. Super excited to have Merrylue on the show because it's just one of those things that you see a lot, right? The quote unquote great resignation. People are leaving opportunities. They're finding better opportunities. People are getting laid off. What does this mean right now for the economy? What does this mean for you, the listener? Look, give this 100% of your ears. You don't want to miss the message. Merrylue, I want to welcome you onto the show. Please give our listeners a 3 to 5 minute introduction. What brings you onto the podcast? And please, let's dive into this book.
You got it. Well, thanks so much, Javi. A real pleasure to be with you today. And the reason I wrote this book is people leaders everywhere are just flat out struggling right now. They're burning out. In fact, they're the number one group that has joined this, as we've coined it, to the great resignation, the big quit. The point is people are leaving a workplace unless it's something that is going to help them in so many ways they're looking for right now that's very different from what it has been in the past. And they're not getting the help they need. We're giving people leaders advice on what they should be doing or what they should be thinking. So for example, to keep your great people and to be what you need to be as a leader, here's what you need to do. You need to really build an authentic culture filled with transparency based on trust. Okay, like what the heck does that even mean? And I'm a trained professional. And I don't know what that means. And so we're not helping people leaders understand the tactics and the tools. So I wrote the Big Quit Survival Guide as literally a triage manual to give people the real tools that they can use on the spot. It's filled with actual scripts on how to talk with your people. It doesn't just say things like, well, hey, get to know your people. That's what they want from you now. What does that mean? Hey, Javi, how was your weekend? Oh, your kid played soccer. Well, good game. Okay, let's go back to work. Did I just get to know that person? No. So this book is filled with actual scripts, checklists. For example, again, we're telling managers, hey, to keep your good people, make sure that first day is really critical and important to welcome them. Okay, what should I do? So there's a whole checklist of what to do step by step to make sure if either that person's on site or, more importantly, if they're part of the remote culture, the hybrid culture, they're coming on part on site, part working remotely. It's really about giving people the help that they need, that they can put into place. I'll add another thought. No, don't just help a leader by saying, hey, watch for the signs that you think your great employees might be exhibiting to warn you of them quitting. Okay, what are those signs? For example, do I start to see an employee that was very outgoing now is not so much so, all these kinds of things. So to answer your question, I wrote this book because people need help. People leaders are so struggling and they're just not getting that tangible direction on what I need to do right now because we're in a whole different workplace.
Okay, there's so many different ways for us to go from there. Let's unpack this. Okay, so I want to speak from experience here. I've seen this time and time again, especially maybe 2-3 years ago. They do these employee engagement surveys, right? It's quote unquote anonymous, right? It's so funny because
it's anonymous until you have to enter your employee ID number.
Exactly that. But what I just find so funny about it is sometimes they do the surveys, but that's it, right? There's no progress behind the surveys. They ask for employee feedback and all this good stuff.
Yeah.
But no change 6 months, a year later. Why is that?
Well, that's a great question. And that's probably one of the first steps to build one of the cultures that'll make people flee from that organization faster than possible. I call that a fake culture. And employees today are sniffing that out very quickly. And you're not going to attract someone who can see things like, here's a mission statement, here's all the right sayings up on the wall. We even solicit information by doing these employee surveys, which is giving the message that we care, and then we don't do squat. And that is really setting up a culture of mistrust. And one of the biggest things that people will see is not what you say, but they're going to watch what you do. And that culture of whether I'm going to trust you or not, don't solicit my feedback if you're not going to do something with it. And it sets up this culture of mistrust in that regard. And as far as exit surveys or employee surveys go, there's a lot of ways you can collect data from people, but you're better off not even asking the question than to ask the question and never acknowledge it, or worse yet, never even follow it up. That can go same for a leader dealing with an employee. If I say to that employee, I care about you as your boss, I want to be a good leader, I want to be empathetic, I want to be, all the things that people are asking for today. The biggest rally cry out there from employees is treat me like a human being. So if we have a boss that says, hey, I'm going to treat you like a human being, I'm going to do all these things, and I'm just talking the talk, so to speak, and then my behavior and what that employee actually sees and hears from me is completely different, that employee is not going to probably even give you a 2-week notice. They'll just say, I'm out of here. I don't need this. So you're better off never holding a one-on-one if you say they're really important, but all you do is keep canceling them. What is the message of how important I really am to you? So there's a big disconnect, and that's driving a culture of mistrust and what I call the fake culture, and people see through it. They're not going to stay in that environment.
It's funny you say that because, they say, oh, we're a family. Oh, that's how you treat your family? But you bring up something, you said exit surveys. I want to talk to you about the whole interview process.
Yeah.
So here's my take on it. I strongly believe And you know what's so funny? I don't want to get sidetracked, but I strongly believe how an employee feels when they leave the company is just as important as how they feel applying, just starting out working for the company. Can you talk to us about the importance of establishing exit interviews? Because I could tell you this, I only recall one job, and this was a job that I had maybe 7-8 months ago. That was the first job that's ever given me an exit interview. Can you talk to us about the importance of that?
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point there because I want to speak to this whole data collection, if I will, if you will, in terms of trying to understand what's really going on in the why behind someone who chooses to leave or someone who chooses to stay. That information can be just as important. But here's the thing with exit interviews or stay interviews, and I want to just give a little bit of context. People have used a variety of these kinds of things before. Some will conduct them, others don't, like you said. But I want you to think about the game we used to play as kids called cold, warmer, hot. Do you remember that? Everyone would leave the room and then you'd hide an object and then a person would come back in and you had to say, oh, you're cold, cold, freezing, warmer, warmer, hot, hot, you're boiling, you're boiling. All right. Here's what I want you to think of. Exit interviews, even if they're done well, are cold. You're cold. And what I mean by cold is saying, do you really get behind why someone's leaving? Now, it's rare that yes, you may, but for the most part, think about just, questions. You've already given your 2 weeks notice, right? So now you're called in by an HR person on staff, and they're going to ask you questions like, well, what could we have done to have made you stay? Were you managed effectively? How could we have impacted your? Okay, I think those questions are ridiculous at that point. You're gone. You are so mentally gone. It's like, why are we even spending the money and the time to have this conversation? Because usually, to your point earlier, Yahavi, they're not going to collect and do much with that data. If you were a great employee, here's the other downside to this. Great employees literally don't burn professional bridges. So they're not going to be as forthcoming as perhaps you would like in those exit interviews. They might say, well, it's been great. My boss has been under issue, but I'm good. Okay, they're going to be very accommodating. That's not good data to make changes. The stay interview, I would call that as a little bit warmer. Okay, so you might be called in by someone above your boss to say, tell me what's going on in your mind right now. What is it you're doing that you like? What do you feel good about your job? So they're, again, collecting data. Sometimes those questions can get just too general, and we don't do anything with that. So, if I were to ask you, well, what's your dream job, Yahavi? You're working here as a coder, a programmer. What's your dream job? How can I help you get promoted? What do you want to do? And you might say something to me like, well, Merrylue, my dream job really is to be a drummer in a rock band. I mean, that's what I really want to. Okay, how am I going to use that to help grow? So I want to propose, and I outline this in my book, again, The Big Quit Survival Guide, what really is that boiling, hot sweet spot is to have a 3R conversation all during the time that employee is staying with me on a regular basis. And I want to take a minute, if I may, to digress into what is a 3R conversation. I want you to think about a scale, a teeter-totter, something that you're going to balance. And the 3 R's that are going on in an employee's head to constantly make that decision, if I'm going to leave or stay, they are the following. That first R sits on one side of the scale, and I call those the requirements. Those are the things that I literally have to do to succeed at this job. Now, you can read the job description and you can get a list of those requirements, right? If you're in sales, you're going to make cold calls, you're going to make presentations. If you're in food service, you're going to wait on tables and you may clean restrooms. Those are all the requirements directly that I have to do. Now, there's some indirect requirements too that are a little more personal in nature. For example, my company's calling me back to the office. I have to now make an hour commute. That's going on the requirements bucket. That's adding weight. Maybe I can't get to my kid's soccer game now because there's a team meeting I have to attend every week. That's another weight going into the requirements bucket. So now I've got these buckets of requirements, right? Hopefully I start to balance this scale with what I'm getting in return, because if I'm not getting enough in return, I'm out of here. That second R that sits on the other side of that scale are the rewards. Think of these as the tangible things you're picking up and putting in your pocket. For example, your paycheck. Maybe you have a 401k and you have an offer for that. You might have a bonus, a sign-on bonus. You might have a benefits package. Maybe you're working for an employer who says, hey, I'll pay you college tuition. We're seeing a lot of that right now. These are all rewards that tangibly you can pick up and put in your pocket. Now, let's look at that teeter-totter right now. Life is good if right now those requirements are being balanced by the rewards I'm getting in return. You're thinking, I'm working hard, but I'm getting stuff back. I'm good. Well, here's the problem. It doesn't stop there, because we are all human beings. We come pre-wired with a set of needs that employers are not tapping into, and I want to help bring that to light. That third R now comes into this scale, and it sits right next to those rewards. That third R is respect. How am I feeling while doing this job? So, do I feel valued? Do I have a purpose here? Do I feel fulfilled? Hello, is this starting to sound familiar while everyone's walking out the door? It doesn't take anything short of a pandemic for people to say, I'm fed up with this old command and control boss relationship I've had forever. You mix that with a gallon of, hey, life is fragile. We all went through that with the pandemic. Anyone could wake up at any point and boy, life is not an assured thing. And then you sprinkle in a little of that taste of working from home and having more of an opportunity for, no wonder there was a big quit explosion, because it was the perfect storm. So now I'm after being fulfilled, respected. I'm thinking as I'm doing this job, do I have autonomy here? Do I feel I can show up and do my best work? So now let's look at those three R's. If they're all balanced, that employee will stay with you forever, as long as they can. I'm working hard. People like to work. I'm getting good stuff back. And you know what? I love what I'm doing. Now let's look at some variations. And here's where companies are getting into trouble with this. We can't change those three R's. They come pre-wired as a human being. We either work within that framework or we don't. And the ones that are choosing to work within that framework, those companies, they're attracting and keeping the best people because they get this. But here's what happens. Let's say we've got those requirements, right? Those don't change. We have got now rewards, let's say, are quite heavy. Let's say I'm getting lots of good stuff coming back from this job. It's okay. They might even at least meet or exceed those requirements in some cases. And let's say that respect bucket, though, is almost empty. Now you're going to work at this job, and here's what you're thinking. I hate this place. They treat me horribly. I hate what I'm doing. I get the Sunday scaries every night. I'm choking on wanting to, I don't want to even go to work. The whole thing. But here's how they will stay under duress almost. Where am I going to go though and make this kind of money? What else is in that reward bucket? Well, where am I going to go and get this benefit package I need for my autistic son? Whatever it might be, people stick it out. Now, the pandemic has come along, and here's what we're seeing. People are willing to take much lower rewards for an increase in respect and feel like I've got more control and a better sense of well-being. And so that brings me to the other different way this can balance. So let's say we've got those requirements, right? And then we've got a reward bucket that's maybe not quite so heavy. Maybe it's a startup company. They don't have stock options. They don't have a company car. They're not going to give you all these things that maybe other companies could. But let's say to compensate for that weight, though, that respect bucket is super heavy. And now it's still somewhat balanced. And here's what that employee is thinking. Well, I'm not going to get rich at this job right away. Can't, build my 401k that I used to have. But you know what? These people treat me like gold. I love this job. I have never wanted to go to work. Got to keep my barista gig on Saturday to make the car payment. You know what, bud? It's worth it. I love what I do. So then you've got the classic problem we're seeing today. Requirements keep getting heavier. Rewards are barely keeping pace. Money does matter when you don't have it, but it's not the long-term motivator. And then respect isn't even registering. And we wonder why people are walking in groves out the building. So
that is a very powerful point. I want to say thank you for preaching on that. You talk about this in your book, right? People are people. People are people first.
Right.
With all that being said, with leadership, to much is given, much is required. I believe like leadership is under a lot of pressure right now. There's just a lot of pressure coming down on leadership. What advice would you have for leadership? With everything that you mentioned, especially with reward, how can leadership go about just I'm trying to frame this the right way, but how can leadership be efficient at what they're doing, retaining employees, hitting their numbers? Because I'll be quite honest with you, if you're in leadership right now, you got to be sweating. You got to be nervous. You're because right. People are getting laid off, and if your team isn't performing, they're looking at you. And people like we talked about this right before we started recording. And I mentioned I was looking at the side of my LinkedIn. I'm just seeing layoffs and layoffs and layoffs. And I don't know. Sometimes, leadership, leadership could be good. But sometimes, I don't know, Merrylue, like, what's your thoughts on leadership right now? Any advice?
Yeah. Well, you nailed something there you maybe weren't aware of, and it's very insightful. That is the number one group leaving. It's the mid-level to upper-level managers right now who are walking out, the fastest group. And here's why. These people caught in the middle have been trying to be all and support their frontline employees through these last couple of years. They've not been trained to do that. They get thrown into these jobs. Essentially, they were a great individual contributor, we call them, or a person just doing their job, not leading people. But then they get tapped on the shoulder and say, hey, you're so good at doing this job. You know what? On Monday, we're going to put you in charge of 12 people. We've just set them up from hero to zero. They don't get training. And they've got now this whole people thing they're trying to keep under wraps and manage. But at the same time, they're caught between a rock and a hard place because we have the C-suite, the chief operating suite of people and the owners or whatever, they're putting extreme pressure on these leaders to perform in a way that isn't realistic, or they don't have the tools. So right now you've got this whole group of mid-level people going, you know what, this is not worth it because I can't win either way. So let's go back and look at something constructive though, and answer that question. What does leadership do? And I'm going to bring back in having that 3R conversation. Here's the problem we've been trying to handle retention. Retention's not new, Yahavi. It's been around forever. We're always trying to figure out what keeps good people. But what's interesting now is it's a whole different mindset. So these are people that need help that aren't getting the kind of training that they need. So I'm looking at just really giving them some tactical tools. So for example, I could define as an employee requirements that could be very different in my bucket. So for example, let's say you've got an hour commute, right? Now for one person, that could mean a fate worse than death. You're like, you want me to what? Get back in the car and drive an hour? And gas is how expensive? No, I'm not doing that. Now, another person might take that same requirement and count it as a reward. Man, I would love to hear a podcast just for once, from start to finish. I can do that in my hour commute. Here's where managers have to get smart to answer your question. How am I going to know if you're that employee that's going to use that commute as a requirement or a reward if I don't ask you? So I'm going to follow. So Yahavi, what are the rewards for you in this job? They're going to be very unique to you. And what are those requirements to you? And if I don't have that conversation, most leaders don't. They don't know how, or they don't have time. And that's why I wrote the survival guide. Here's the script. Here's the list of questions, right? Now, let's talk finally about this. This respect piece is very interesting right now. It's the number one, as I said, rally cry. I want respect. I want to be treated as a human being. Here is where leaders are struggling, and here's how we can help them in leadership. Take that same question, only now we're going to look at respect. So Yahavi, you've just reported to me as a new employee on my team, okay? And I'm going to sit down with you that very first couple of days and say, let's talk about respect, Yahavi. How are we working together? Apart from being civil and human to each other, we're not going to cuss each other out and bully each other. We get that. We're going to be decent human beings. But it goes beyond that. How can I, as your leader, surely demonstrate to you that I'm modeling respect in a way that's meaningful to you? Now, Yahavi might say, hey, Merrylue, I'm kind of new to this industry. I think the way you could show me respect the most would be if just maybe for the first 30 days, I could be assured of connecting with you for 5 minutes. Every morning, could I just make sure you're there? I might have questions. I don't want to waste time trying to find answers. Could you just be available for me? And then we'll go from there, right? And I'm thinking, okay, because you would say to me, that would be very respectful, because I'll tell you what, in my last job, I never heard from my boss for 8 months. And at that point, it was only something I was doing wrong all the time. So that was very disrespectful. Now, here's where I'm going to get into trouble as a leader. I'm going to walk away from that conversation thinking, okay, I'm going to make sure I'm checking in every 5 minutes with all my people. Wrong. I have a second conversation with another employee who says to me, well, Merrylue, the way you could show respect to me, I've learning the ropes, but give me my marching orders, communicate clearly, let me know what needs to be done, and then you know what? Let me go. Let me fly. Let me do my job. We'll check in, one-on-one like we normally do. But the biggest fear and disrespect you could show me would be to micromanage me, which is why I left my job last time. So unless I have this 3R conversation, we'd have that same conversation about what's a requirement for you, what's a reward for you, and what does respect look like for you. And here's where companies are getting into trouble. We keep trying to solve employee retention, which is a personal, just as I showed in that last example, a very personal, one-on-one individual problem that I have to address. We keep trying to solve that with an organizational-wide solution. We just keep throwing stuff at it. And here's a news flash. More bagels, ping pong tables, and craft brews are not a retention strategy. I'm seeing, literally right now, I'm seeing leaders trying to entice people to come back into the office with things like that. That never worked in the last 10 years. What makes us think that's going to work now? So again, I get very passionate about helping people get real specific here on how to address this issue. And we're just missing that mark.
Man, I jumped up when you said micromanage. I hate micromanagement. My thing is this. I firmly believe, maybe you could touch on this, but lack of trust comes from, that's where micromanagement comes from. Lack of trust.
Exactly.
And my biggest takeaway with just like, we're 30 minutes in, and the key word is communication. Like you hit the nail right in the head. Communication.
Yeah, it's huge. And here's something that's even more critical for leaders today. You know, right now we're watching this big game of chicken go on between employers and employees who know their street value. There's top performers out there who are sitting back, you know, watching this. And what's interesting is it's who's going to call whose bluff first. You know, employers are thinking, okay, we're all coming back to the office, and if you don't want to work, you know, fine, I want people who do. And we mistakenly assume visibility and presence is the same as working in production. It's not. And this message is getting made very loud and clear in that regard. So to build trust, we've got to help leaders let go of the old ways of monitoring performance. We're looking at, and I'm seeing right now, you know, companies who are putting trackers on the computers. Companies' computers, those that are working from home. You know, you go to the restroom, you go, you know, make a grilled cheese sandwich, and it's blinking on some leaders that you're not on the job. And that is not a trust-driven culture. And that's what people are pushing back on today. They want to show up and do good work, but they want to do it in a way that they're feeling safe. And that's not a safe environment. And you know, here's something interesting. We did some research a while back and looked at those leaders who got the lowest scores on those employee engagement surveys in terms of how they treat their employees. Okay, so we isolated that group. There were about 6,000 leaders countrywide that we looked at. And we conducted some surveys and interviews of our own to assess, well, why do you think, leader, your scores were so low? What is it you own in all of this? Two themes came out. The very first theme was, I don't have time to be nice. Now that's quite telling in a culture that's toxic and doesn't support safety and emotional civility. And we see a lot of that right now. People are on edge. They're just unsettled, and they're desperate to get results. And this is not going to help the situation. So I don't have time to be nice, which fascinates me because the last time I checked, respect is free. So, you know, and it doesn't take much time. But here was the most concerning theme. The second reason they said that they're treating people the way they're treating them and not trusting them is simply, I'm modeling what my leader does for me. So they're seeing higher up in the organization someone who doesn't value trust. So guess what? Again, we're human beings. We're pre-wired with needs. So in defense of that leader, they want to keep their job. So guess what? They're going to act like the leader they're reporting to because they need to be safe. Well, can we stop this crazy chain? Let's break this. And I really want to get to the higher level C-suite business owners. It starts at the top. If I come with a sense of trust and I'm building that through my people, it continues to water down and get to the people that, are on the very front line. So it's all connected up.
Whew. Last time I checked, respect is free. Didn't I say this is going to be one of those? Didn't I say in the beginning? Didn't I say that, Mary? Okay.
Yeah, you did.
All right. I just needed a quick breather right there. Okay. So you touched on something, right? Remote, especially, work culture as a whole. There's hybrid culture and there's definitely remote culture. I've had, incredible hybrid opportunities in the past as a full-time personal trainer. Past 2 years, I've had some remote work here and there. I kind of want to swing back. You said something about people not coming in for like bagels and things like that. But I've also noticed this too, especially with remote opportunities. They get very innovative in terms of like little perks. I had an SDR role and they would do something like, oh, whoever closed the most deals get a $200 Amazon card and things like that. I thought that was really cool. And then there was that, okay. Then I realized there's so much different opportunities out there where current employers are looking at, okay, this is a great sales position, for example, but there's thousands of other opportunities and their on-target earnings is way more. And you're literally sitting right here and you touched on another thing. I mean, we're living in an era, especially with inflation. I don't have to commute to work. My car takes 93. So I save money on that commute. I could stay right here in the comfort of my own home and work. And I must say, and I'm not the only one that said this. I've heard other people say this, that some people work so much harder remotely and they go over the top. Like they would give extra hours. They would start early. They're answering emails. They're, because they're not in the break room, gossiping about, office stuff. I want to ask you this. Why do you feel that is that people work harder remotely versus hybrid?
Yeah. One word, FOMO. It's the fear of missing out. And because people are wired as human beings to build relationships and, we connect with most people and that's an enjoyable part of our lives. That's removed with all of its dimensions that are missing when we're hybrid. And what the big concern is, it's a fear of something that we call perception bias on the part of the leader. The research shows us that when we're connected face to face, we tend to migrate towards the people that we connect well with. And that's a more powerful connection than it ever is virtually. We can see people virtually. It's still very flat. It's a 2-dimension. So here's what happens. Someone who's working remote, and not everyone is wired to work remotely. We're definitely seeing that research. Some people love it. Other people don't. Some of the younger generations entering into the workforce, believe it or not, do like being in person and they like that opportunity to connect. But their fear is of missing out on opportunities, promotability. Everything is so scripted, if you will, where it's virtual. You don't see those 2-minute little conversations in the hall. They just happen spontaneously or in the break room. They're missing out on all that. So now they are overly compensating by making sure they're showing up as much and as broadly as they can. So you're going to see more emails, more speaking up in the Zoom meetings. You're going to see if they're being clocked on hours, they're working 14 hours a day, I've heard in some cases, or 20 hours a day, because it's almost as if I'm feeling the need to justify that I'm just as productive working from home. But in reality, the research is showing you can be not productive at all and show up every day. But there's this favoritism towards, I'm just going to be feeling more connected to you because you're physically here in an office. The other problem with that, and the pushback we're seeing, is not all the leaders of the leaders of the leaders are following that same advice. And to your point earlier about this building trust or mistrust. So I make an edict of all employees now need to come into the office. And yet the 4 or 5 days that I want them in the office, half the time they're sitting in a conference room on a Zoom call, connecting with people who aren't in the office. And so we're setting up this, mismatch of expectations. And the world's changed, Javi. We're going to tap into global talent. We're never going to have everyone in a room again, maybe like we did many decades gone by. So I think it's part of a strategy we do have to incorporate, working through and knowing as a leader, you've got a lot of extra duties, if you will, to make sure that that hybrid employee is feeling those 3 R's are in balance. So there's a lot of extra to keep up just the status quo there.
Ooh, okay. I want to ask you this about, I kind of want to swing to your book real quick, right?
Yeah.
Who is your book for, right? Like, the title just jumps at me, right? Big Quit Survival Guide.
Right.
Who is this book for?
My target reader are leaders who are leading people. I'm helping leaders with tactical tools and techniques to keep their people. So my target reader are those leaders or business owners who have to depend on their livelihood or their success on a group of people that they're leading. So, it's interesting. I've had a lot of individual contributors pick up my book because they want to stay in their job. They're really struggling with their leader. And what's interesting, they've shared that just this conversation with the 3 R's, they're now giving themselves the insight to approach my leader and say, here's what's feeling out of balance, leader. The requirements compared to the rewards. So it's almost like I'm giving them a voice to explain to their leader what it is they're trying to get so they can stay at that job. But it's really for that leader and to help that leader with how to manage that team so they're going to stay and be productive.
Oh, this is really good stuff. Okay. If you, I don't know. Yeah, I want to ask this anyways. Okay. For successful company culture, what's the number one thing? The number one thing that comes to mind?
Trust. And I don't want to put that word out there as an abstract because there's too much of that. What is that? The danger too, it's not a family. And I, as you said earlier, I hear that all the time. Oh, we're a family. We're not a family. We're a business. Now we have family-like behavior sometimes, but we're a business. And so the fastest way to build trust, because I want to take that word out of the abstract cloud, and I want to say the fastest way to build trust as a leader is to model what you want your people to do. It goes back to all of that. Don't ask me. Don't solicit my opinion if you're not going to do anything. People are not going to pay much attention to what you say. I hate to say it. They're not going to pay a whole lot of attention to what we do so much. They are going to pay attention to how we make them feel as human beings. And the fastest way to build trust is to model what you want. So, for example, if you're telling your team, hey, we're going to start all of our team meetings on time. We're going to be respectful of people's schedules. And that's a whole nother conversation, just working through meetings and the number of meetings. But if I say to my team, we're always going to start them on time. And yet, as the leader, I'm the one who's always late. You're better off saying, start the meeting whenever you want. If you're not in alignment with what you say and what you do, you are building a foundation of mistrust. And that's the number one thing to build that culture.
Yeah, it's so funny as you say that. I automatically thought about this. I remember opportunities and jobs that I've had in the past, and it was just really bad. Like, they were managers, but they were terrible leaders. There's a difference. Like, just because you're a manager does not make you a leader. Oh my gosh, Merrylue, I don't want to even open up that can of worms. But I've experienced some really terrible management. And it's so funny because most of the leadership came from people that were under the management, and they were actually leading the management. It was just, you kind of touched on it too, right? The favoritism. It's also the seniority of just people being at the company longer. Yeah, you've been here long, but you're a terrible leader. You're a manager. And you know what? Since we're on that, can you touch on that? Because I've worked for some terrible managers, absolutely terrible. But the people that I was surrounded with, there was just so much really good leaders, but they never got the opportunity to move up. Yeah. They never got the opportunity, and they found better opportunities. Can you touch on that? Because there has to be something where there some type of leadership training for these managers, and they're going through consistent training, because, and I'll end off on this plane, and I'll end off on this point, and I'll land my plane. I've just seen this so many times. It just frustrates me. I've seen so many really good employees work for really bad managers, and they just suck at leadership. And I get it. Sometimes it's not their fault, but you have to take accountability if you're in that position, because it's like this. If we have a sports team, sometimes it's going to come down to the players, but it comes down to the coach. You're calling the plays. We look to you, and it goes back to kind of starts when we were kids, right? We model what our parents do. Right. So you can't get mad. Oh, Judy's late, but you're the manager. You're always late. So you kind of like open that door for everyone else to be late. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to unpack so many points that you've made there. It's how to bad. I've always wondered, as probably any one of our listeners right now, is like, how did that person ever get promoted as a leader? My quick comeback was, they must have photographs. Because you really wonder, how. Well, let's go back to that human behavior that drives so much of what we do, and what we had as that second theme, those leaders who get those worst scores. I'm just modeling the behavior that my leader shows me. Well, we have these perception bias. And when people feel that they are mostly like the people we're meeting, or the people that we're being first introduced to, when they're like me, then I feel very connected. I'll give you an example, a personal story where I couldn't believe that this is what I actually heard from someone. I was working for an organization, and I came into that organization years ago as an entry-level manager, and I wanted to be a director. That was the next step up, and certainly had the experience. If you just look at the skill sets and and all those things, the feedback from the people I had worked with. And I was told by the vice president that that job would be reporting to. She said literally to me, she goes, "You're more than qualified. You've got the skills and everything else, but I just don't know you as well as I knew my friend I went to high school with and grew up with, who got the job." So, we, I guess sometimes put aside some of the logic when we think about the impact of bringing people, but it's kind of a human phenomenon that we do that. But here's the second issue too, and you also touched upon this. 76% of leaders coming into a first-time leadership role do not receive any formal leadership training. And as I said a minute ago, that's just setting them up for failure. And we make the mistake because they were very good, like a sales rep, very good at closing business, right? Very good at, man, not only did they make their quota, they blew it out in spades every month. I mean, it was just over the top. So we think, hey, we're going to promote this person to be a district manager. No people skills, no communication skills when it comes to emotional intelligence, working with human beings, all these things. And so what these people do is they end up kind of out of desperation, this command and control. I see that they're burning out. They're just saying, hey, look, if you don't produce, then you're going to be out of here in a month, with no help, no support, because they don't know how to provide it. Or we will see them, here's another big trap. We see that new leader taking over the work of all the people because they don't know how to train the people to do the work with them. So now they're working 40 hours a day, figuratively speaking, doing the work of the people in order to meet the numbers. And they're just not trained. And so they're burnt out. They're frustrated. And anytime you're physiologically burnt out, it's going to affect mood. I have a whole chapter on the book of burnout and what's causing it and how to get out of it and how to recognize it and work through it, with people. So there's a combination of reasons that we've got such poor leaders in those positions. And again, what's new this time? Employees are not putting up with it. They're voting with their feet, and the number one reason, it still bears out in the research, the number one reason people leave a job is because of the leader, because of that boss. And so that's the point of trying to understand this, unravel it, give people tools on how to break that cycle, because they will continue to walk.
Yeah, I was referring to me in terms of, people getting passed up on for like these great leadership management opportunities. But what makes this so, I get so passionate about this. Man, this was so good, by the way. I get so passionate about this because there is someone right now, there's thousands, maybe millions of people right now that feel that exact way. Like they're getting overlooked because they know someone else personally. Like, as you mentioned, they have all the skill sets, they have the credentials, but they're not getting the opportunity. And because they're not getting the opportunity, they're looking elsewhere. And it's kind of like, if you don't value me, I'm pretty sure the next company will, right? And man, it's just, it's really unfortunate. It happens to a lot of people. And there are people that, they just, this is another sad thing. There are some people that are kind of like, they're betting on hope, right? They're still thinking that, they're there for 9-10 years. It's going to happen. Then boom, they hire someone else. They hire someone else that took that opportunity that you thought you was going to get 7 years ago. Now you gave that company 7 years of your best effort. And it just,
or you have as well, you have a regime change, right? Change of leadership, and they bring in people that they feel more comfortable with, and you're on the outs, or vice versa. And, I'll make it a quick note to something that's very interesting. Bringing people into an organization and doing so with just money. There's something interesting we see with that. We see these big sign-on bonuses or these, and I'm not saying that money's not a factor. It's absolutely a factor in why people leave if that compensation is not competitive. There again, that 3R balance, that reward has to have at least a competitive base to the compensation. But where we're making mistakes is trying to keep people by just throwing money at it. Whatever that bonus might be or that increase might be, the research tells us that it's gone. The impact of that is gone within 3 to 6 months. You've absorbed that into the landscape of why you come to work. Now just that much more money is status quo. But what's interesting, another major reason people are leaving today is, as you had said, lack of promotability, lack of opportunity. And here's where it gets tricky. It's not so much the vertical climb like maybe we've seen in so many decades gone past. You come in at this level and then you're at this level, this level, this level. It's not even realistic anymore, Yahavi, to expect people to sign in with an organization, stay there for 40 years and retire. That's gone. That's over. That was our grandfather's workplace. It doesn't work that way. We hope to keep people as long as we can keep them engaged, and it's a two-way street. We have to give what they need, and they're getting what they want from us as the employer. But what's interesting is what you can do is give them even lateral opportunities. In the book, I call it swirling. It keeps them engaged. It said, they're going to want to walk away from their job with you being better and more savvy as far as skills go than when they came in. And that doesn't mean you've got to put them through manager and then, assistant manager and all these other jobs. Instead, they're looking for experiences. For example, you're a business owner. Maybe you only have 5 or 10 people. You don't have a big operation, but you've got a star pupil among those people you're leading. How about finding out through a 3R conversation, how about shadowing me as the business owner? I would like to be able to grow you as maybe a general manager. And, I'm giving you all of this wonderful experience. So we've got to help these folks, as the book points out, get creative, shows them how to do it, because people want to stay as long as they're feeling I have an opportunity.
Ooh, okay. This was a really good conversation today. Merrylue, I want to say thank you for spending your time with me today. This has been very rewarding, and you touched on something about like those times are gone. Like people spending like 40 years at a company. I am really curious of what the work life is going to look like in the next 15 to 20 years, let alone the next 5 years, because for the last 2 years, I tell you, people are pivoting again. Yeah. Prior to this, for the last 9 years, full-time personal trainer, last 2 years, podcasting, doing this full-time. It's so interesting because, man, people are realizing people are also, and I'll end on this point, especially if you're, in sales, right? Anyone that's an SDR or AE, and you're making these companies and you're closing these big deals, you're 30K, 50K for these companies, and you're seeing your potential. You're taking your talents elsewhere, and you're probably going to go to a better company that has higher OTE, or launching your own startup and getting your own funding and getting yourself established. So I am just like, man, this is, I've said in the beginning, this is going to be a really, really good episode, because this is what's happening. And if you, not you, but the listeners, if you're listening to this right now and you don't have that open mindset to what's going on, and they call you into the office and you think it's for the promotion and you get laid off, or you're getting overlooked, I'll be honest with you, don't be surprised.
Mhm.
Don't be surprised.
Mhm.
Every day I'm getting an update that there are layoffs and layoffs and layoffs. So I would really encourage everyone to, yeah, kind of like go back to, what do you want to do? What do you want to do, and
Mhm.
what do you want to commit to? Because I get it. Companies are always going to be profit first over people. It's a business, Mary Lou. It's a
Correct.
business. I want to let you I want to give you the floor and give you your closing
Mhm.
thoughts and kind of like take it away.
Yeah, no, thank you for all of that. I would say that probably the most important thing to remember is that there has been a seismic shift in human behavior and how work fits into it. What's different is the word maybe has become the new loyalty. Working in the past has been all about being very loyal to an employer for the need of sticking out a long career and getting rewards where the company took care of us and we took care of the company by our loyalty. That's gone. That is not going to come back anytime soon. And here's why. People who are looking now for employment do not see it like they used to decades ago as my entire source of validation, who I am as a person, how I identify, my self identity, my self esteem. So much of that has been defined through the filter of my work. That's gone. I doubt that's ever coming back. What's come to the forefront now and how work is different is new employees coming in or employees who are looking for new positions. They want work to only be a part of their life that they want to live. People are now curating events and they put work in that bucket. I'm going to curate an event that's going to create the opportunity for me to live my best life. And once we adopt that, and once as employers we understand we're not going to change that outcome, those employers that align with that value system will be the ones that will be carrying the star performers with them because they get that piece of it. So, bottom line, it goes back to treat me like a human being, but again, give me an opportunity to let work fit into the way I need it in order to live my best life. And
Mm.
that's my whole premise on the Big Quit Survival Guide. You don't have to figure it out on your own. You can go to the website. It's www.bigquitsurvivalguide. There's lots of free resources there for you to get started. And certainly, I'm here as a resource just to help people navigate through this whole change in our workplace today.
Last time I checked, respect is free. Oh my gosh, but you can't find that at any company. Like, there, respect is not being served at every company, but money
Right,
is. So
right.
always remember, respect is more important than money, because you could always get money, but
That's correct.
respect. Oh my gosh. Okay. Whew, this was so much fun. I've said it from start to finish. I told you I'm always right. I'm always right. I knew this was going to be one of those episodes. Mary Lou, this was so exciting. Please, where can we follow you? Where can we get your book? And where can we keep up with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The book is available on Amazon. So you can just go to Amazon and enter the Big Quit Survival Guide. It is available in 3 different formats as a hard copy, paperback, I should say, or as an ebook, as well as an audio version for those that do have an hour commute and can listen to that in the car. As well, the book is designed so you can flip through it quickly through each chapter by looking at what I call the fast 5, just or the take 5, just at the end of each chapter. What are the 5 most important points? But most importantly, There is a survival kit that is described in the book as well. And if you go to the website and you enter the passcode, which is provided in one of the formats of the books, you can literally print out all of the tools in an 8.5 by 11 notebook hard copy. So you can keep a record of all the 3R conversations, you've had with each employee. You've got someone coming on board. There's your checklist, for what I need to do to make their first day wonderful. So all of that's there. I'm on LinkedIn as well, so you can certainly keep up. And we invite everyone to enjoy all the free resources, the blog materials. All of that's on the website. I also conduct workshops, one-on-one coaching, keynote speakers. Again, my whole passion is to give leaders the tactical help they need, to get through this and do it in a way that's really more successful than just, I want to survive it. I want to thrive. It's just, how do I make this better?
This was so much fun. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. Okay, now for the listeners, I want to thank you for watching or listening, however you're consuming this content, to the St. Clair Speak Show podcast. If you scroll down to the episode description, it will take you directly to Merrylue's website. You could follow her via LinkedIn, connect with her on LinkedIn as well, and also purchase a copy of her book. You have to be ready, especially right now. This is a book that you must have. If you're looking for work, you need this book. If you have a job, you need this book. If you're a leader, you need this book. Trust me, it's actually more expensive for you not to have this book. Think about it. With all that being said, what good is information if you don't apply it? I'll catch you in the next episode. This is the St. Clair Speak Show.